Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Warner Lewis. Welcome back to my podcast. It's great to be here with you today. I've got some great information to share for you and to share with you. The topic for today's podcast is life is short and then you die. So plan while you can, right? I know it's a little bit in your face, but this is a gentle, maybe not so gentle reminder that life is a terminal condition. No one gets out alive. I don't know, maybe you're different, not quite sure, but you know, at some point, we are all going to perish. It's interesting if you look at it philosophically, like I sometimes do, the last person that we see in our physical bodies, we may not be present, we're deceased, but the last person um, that our physical body sees is the coroner, right? And a coroner or coronation, that word, the coroner, has its root in the word coronation, to place a crown upon the head of the person. So, really, for eons, the process of passing from life to death, and perhaps I'd like to think to afterlife. I've had a near death experience we'll talk about in a minute. But it's the highest achievement of our life is being coronated and passing on to the next stage of existence, whatever that might be. So, not to be too philosophical, but life and death are pretty essential tenets and concepts, foundational concepts for what we're doing here today, living, breathing, living life, right? No one gets out alive. We're all going to perish. I've had very sweet clients who say, if I die, and I say, forgive me, sir, ma'am, it's not a question of if you do, if you die. It's a question of how, when, and under what circumstances. Everybody's going to go that way. And we all go, yeah, I know it's true. So basically, human nature is for us to be in denial of our humanity and in denial of our morbidity or of our mortality. So I'm just here to remind you. And again, I understand this is why you'll never invite me to a party, because I'm the ultimate buzzkill guy, right? Yeah, you're going to die. Well, thanks for the reminder. But I built a career and helped thousands and thousands of people all over the country to make that process as smooth as it can possibly be. In fact, we say that doing proper planning by putting wills, trusts, powers of attorney in place is the most loving thing we can do for our families on the way out. Because essentially it puts all of our wishes into these documents, trusts and powers of attorney and last wills and testament, that clearly spell out our wishes. And the people that we trust are put in a position to execute upon our wishes, to make sure that our wishes are honored, respected, and implemented. So very powerful. It's a great way to be intentional about your wealth, the money that you've accumulated over your lifetime, your children, your grandchildren, how you want to provide for them, how you don't want to provide for them. In other words, in our trust, there's a guideline section to the trustee, which says essentially, hey, our intention in creating this trust is to educate our children and to provide them with some economic security, some financial security. But it's not intended for them to just be able to sit around all day, lay around on the couch, popping bonbons and not being productive members of society. So there's this sort of double-edged sword with inheritances, with inheriting wealth. And that is that, it can either be a blessing or a curse. And proper planning goes a long way towards making sure that it's a blessing and not a curse for a child or for a beneficiary. And I've seen many people who have inherited a lot of money and never worked a day in their lives. And yet others who have inherited a lot of money who are very productive and very engaged in life and creating more wealth and more opportunity for their family and future generations. So life is short and then you die. So it's really important to plan while you can. So let's look at the statistics. So we have a 100% certainty of perishing and a 60% probability of becoming incapacitated prior to our deaths. Now that opens up a whole area of conversation around how do we manage and how do we finance our incapacity. Well, I'll go into that in more detail in another podcast, but there are ways that we can preserve the estate as much of it as possible in the event of long-term care that it's needed, long-term incapacity. So ways of protecting the estate and ways of maximizing the resources that are available to an ill spouse, for example, in the case of a marital couple, to provide for the ill spouse and yet protect and preserve as much of the estate as possible for the well spouse or the survivor. So there's some really powerful things that we can do. Let me just give you a little background on myself and why I'm here speaking with you today. It has all to do with family. Many, many years ago, my father passed away at the age of 65. Very early, very unexpectedly, passed in his sleep. And that was his greatest wish, actually, to pass in his sleep, because he had spent countless hours, days, months, years caring for both of his parents, who were incapacitated, mentally and physically incapacitated for the last 8 or 10 years of their lives, both of them. And so his greatest wish was to pass in his sleep. Well, he did, but about 25 years too early. And although he had made some attempts to plan, as had my grandfather, lots of things went wrong. Lots and lots of things went wrong. For example, the day that my dad went to the hospital to take his mother off of life support, presented her living will, and the hospital said, "You cannot use that living will document here. It does not meet the content or the form factor requirements for living wills in the state of Oklahoma." So my dad went to the judge, and the judge heard my dad's arguments, and clearly it was my mom's wish not to be kept alive. The document was signed, notarized, witnessed, but it didn't quite fit the format required in Oklahoma. The judge said to my dad, "If you use that document to take your mother off life support, we will try you for murder in the state of Oklahoma." So he took her back to her home, arranged round the clock, 3 shifts a day, 8 hours a day of skilled nursing. And she stayed alive, intravenously fed and hydrated. So this was a major fail in the planning process. And there were other areas that were big fails too, like the lawyer who drafted my father's and grandfather's trusts named himself as a trustee after they were both gone, which kind of put the wolf in charge of the chicken coop, if you know what I mean. And that did not end up well. Huge conflict of interest, very expensive mistake, because in this particular case, the lawyer drained the trust of hundreds of thousands of dollars, completely unethical. And the way I settled my estate, my sisters and I, basically I told the attorney, you breached every fiduciary duty that you have. You broke every rule in the book. He said, "You're right, I did. I was between a rock and a hard spot. I had to decide one way or the other how to do this. And so unfortunately, you got the short end of the stick." He goes, "But you know what? There's a paragraph or provisions within your father's and grandfather's trust that allow me to spend down every last penny of the trust defending myself against your lawsuit against me." Said, "So I promise you, if you lift a finger against me," says the lawyer, "you'll never see a dime. So shut up and sign the document, sport." That's what he told me. That's how I settled my father's and my grandfather's estate. And it was so upsetting and so wrong to me that I started out 27 years ago trying to help as many people as I can to avoid those kinds of problems. So that's what Life Planning Inc. is devoted to, preparing the wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and all of the other legal documents, LLCs, corporations, buy-sell agreements having to do with our personal and our business lives, to make sure that based on the structures and the content of the documents, that things go as smoothly as possible, and that there are as few unaddressed issues and as few chances for backfiring or unintended consequences as possible. So that's really why I'm here. This is my life's purpose, is to help as many people as possible avoid these kinds of problems. Now, we talk about life is short, then you die, plan while you can. Well, I'm the poster boy for plan while you can. At the age of 46, I was playing ice hockey with my son, coaching his team, and I started to feel ill. And eventually, a couple of hours later, hour and a half later, presented myself to the emergency room at a hospital. And the triage nurse said, "Yep, You show none of the classic symptoms of a heart attack, go home. And I said, no offense, but I'd like a second opinion. So they took me back into the exam space. A doctor came in a few minutes later with a crash cart, nitroglycerin, morphine, clot busters. Doctor came in and said, so you're having a heart attack as we speak. I was just, at the age of 46, a little shocked. My then wife came in. I said, honey, if something happens to me, I don't pull through, there's a couple $1 million in life insurance. You'll be fine. She almost slapped me right there on the examination table. And anyway, I had great insurance. They waited 2.5 hours until a helicopter became free to transport me to the nearest hospital, which was 6 or 7 miles away. An ambulance would have gotten me there sooner for 1/10 of the cost, but they saw I had a gold-plated Cadillac insurance policy, and boy, they ordered the helicopter. And as I'm getting on the helicopter, I feel like I'm slipping away. And I said to the flight nurse sitting right next to me, I said, I feel like I'm slipping away. And my vitals were 67 over 33 or something. Like I was going down. She told the helicopter pilot to spool down the aircraft. They got me off the helicopter, more clot busters, more nitroglycerin, and more morphine. And in that minute or so, that minute before the drugs started to kick in, I saw in my mind's eye, like looking up, seeing my father, my grandfather, and my grandmother, like up on a balcony, looking down on me, waving like this, saying, come on up, the water's good. And I turned away in my mind's eye and I said, oh God, if it's the same to you, I'd rather stick around. I'm 46 years old. I've got all these things going on. And I made a deal with him. I said, if you let me live, I'll do this, 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 and this. And it was really devoting my life to helping people, to ministry. I've been involved in several churches and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's a bit of an insight into me and what my motivation is for doing my work. But I can tell you that I saw in my mind's eye this portal to the beyond. That's my near-death experience. So with the drugs kicking in, started to feel better. My vitals came back up, and the helicopter took off, lifting off over the freeway, the city lights, a beautiful starry sky, and a razor-thin neon blue edge at the penumbrance of the sundown, the sunset. So it was like a rising into heaven. Anyway, not to be overly dramatic, but it made a huge impression on me, and that I was given a second chance. I was given a new lease on life, and that was exciting. 5 years later, shortly after a full-blown nuclear stress test, where my cardiologist said, "Oh, your chances of another heart attack are nil," which I took to mean zero. I had another heart attack. This time I was on the spin bike at the gym. So playing hockey the first time, on the spin bike at the gym. Don't ever let them convince you or try to convince you that physical activity cannot cause a plaque wall in your artery to burst and cause a heart attack, okay? Because it certainly can, based on my experience anyway. I'm no doctor, I'm not giving you legal advice, but physical exercise, and I was doing it pretty extreme with hockey and spinning. So anyway, I had another heart attack 5 years later, after being told that the chances of another one were zero. I ran into that cardiologist 2 weeks after my second angioplasty and stent. And I said, "Hey doc, hey, how you doing?" I'm doing okay, but I had another heart attack. And I recall you telling me that my chances of another one were nil. I said, "What's up with that?" And he looked at me and said, "You know what? You just never know." And I'm like, "You're right. You just never know with life." So this is the point. Life is a terminal condition. It's really important to come to terms with our mortality and to do some planning for the people that we care the most about. Because I can tell you the difference between having everything in place and having that peace of mind every time you get on a plane or behind the wheel of your car, it's priceless. This last week, I received a call from a client of mine who was in tears. She was crushed. And the reason she was crushed, her husband had just come home from being out and about, slipped and fell in their kitchen, banged his head, and died instantly. I mean, this is not to be morbid, but this is the nature of life. Life can change in a second, in the blink of an eye. Life can change. So this is why I'm advocating to get over this whole denial thing about, I'm too young, I'm never going to die, what have you. If you have children, if you have a spouse, if you're single, but you have loved ones and you have assets, um, putting these documents into place, the powers of attorney, if you become incapacitated, you're able to name people that you trust to make financial and medical decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. So you can tell these are really, really important documents. And also, excuse me, for parents with minor children, we can create powers of attorney for the minor children that let the parents say, if we become incapacitated, then these are the individuals that we trust and that we empower legally to make financial and medical decisions for our minor children. And then, speaking of powers of attorney and children, when your children turn 18 and they go off to college, for example, and something happens to them, because they're of majority age, you no longer have any dominion over their affairs, right? They're no longer a minor under your control, if you will. So it's important to think about when your children, your 18-year-olds go off to college, they should probably have powers of attorney for financial and healthcare too, in the event something happens to them, an accident or something. And that will enable you and empower you to make decisions for them, which you lose that power as soon as they turn 18, as soon as they become of majority age. So something to think about. There's so many unintended consequences that the failure to plan can cause, or the failure to plan properly can cause, because not all estate plans, not all trusts, wills, and powers of attorney are the same. Only 3% of attorneys, according to the American Bar Association, claim any competence at all in wills and trusts. But if you really drill down and you find the super competent people, the experts, I know lawyers can't refer to themselves as experts, but if you find the people who just devote their entire practice or the vast majority of their practice to estate planning, asset protection planning, business planning, that boils down to about 1%, maybe less than 1% of attorneys who really know what they're doing in this area of the law. So although any attorney legally can prepare a document for you, not all wills, trusts, and powers of attorney are created equally. So keep that in mind too. It's really important to go to someone who's competent to prepare these documents for you. So let's see. You really don't want to get caught dead or incapacitated without the right documents in place. Let's say, for example, one became incapacitated without a power of attorney appointing someone to make those decisions. So there was one instance in Phoenix, a woman by the name of Mary White or Ward, some elderly woman who had a trust but no powers of attorney for some reason. And she became incapacitated, and her brother and sister went to the judge and said, okay, so we're appointed as trustees of her trust. We'd also like to be appointed as agents under her financial and her medical powers of attorney so that we can make those decisions for her. And the judge said, no, I think we're going to name this law firm to represent her as an incapacitated person. And we're going to appoint this fiduciary to manage her purse, right? To manage her finances. And you know what? It took, I forget how long, 18 months roughly, for the team of attorney and fiduciary to spend down $1.3 million that belonged to Mary. And her brother and sister could do nothing. The courts actually stiff-armed the brother and sister. The court broke their duty by having private conversations with the attorneys and the fiduciaries without including Mary's family. So it was just, and then, okay, at the end, this was terrible for the courts and the lawyers and the fiduciary to really steal, if you will, from Mary. And at the end, a board, a panel of judges, 3 judges looked at this circumstance and determined that although the lawyers and even the courts' actions were egregious, in other words, awful and horrendous, egregious and harmful, that it did not rise to the level of actionable, of taking action against the judge or the lawyer. So I'm just saying, this is an unusual circumstance, but these are the kinds of unintended consequences that the failure to plan properly can cause. And I'm in my world as a as a musician, as a race car driver, and as a practicing legal document preparer, I've come to learn that there's usually this many ways to do something right and about 1,000,000 ways to screw them up. And I'm in favor of doing things the right way, that one or two right ways to do it. So anyway, that's my approach to making sure that our legal affairs are in order, helping other people get their legal affairs in order, so that when they pass, or should they become incapacitated, that all their documents are in place. Very, very important. Now, what happens if you don't plan? You may well have heard of probate. Probate is the court proceeding that must occur if you die owning a certain value of assets in your name upon your death. See, when you die, you can no longer sign a document necessary to convey or to sell or transfer ownership to someone else. So a judge, has to supervise the transfer of ownership of assets from a deceased person to the name of their personal representative. And that's another issue. If it's not in writing, then the court gets to appoint who's your personal representative. That can be a problem. It may not be a family member, maybe they're distant, and so they appoint a fiduciary and hand a stranger a pen and your checkbook and give them legal standing to make financial and medical decisions for you. That's not a good thing. So if you die owning property above a certain value, in Arizona it's $100,000, including equity in real estate, which is most of us, then it's going through probate. The way to avoid that is either through a beneficiary designation on a bank account or a brokerage account, saying, upon my death, I want my account to pay over to this person, pay on death. Or a beneficiary deed to real estate in Arizona and many other states that let you say, upon my death, my real estate goes to these individuals. But there are a number of problems with those forms of transfer of ownership upon death. And that the first one is, if you have a couple of children as new owners on your house through a beneficiary deed, how do they take ownership? Is it joint tenants, tenants in common? Is it tenants in the entirety, joint tenants with rights of survivorship? I mean, all kinds of, if it's not defined specifically, then all bets are off. And if it's not set up properly and one of those beneficiaries dies, their half of the house that they inherited by beneficiary deed from mom or dad has to go through probate. I mean, it's just, so you do not want to die owning stuff in your own name. You want to make sure that it has a way to get out. Now, if you use a beneficiary designation to get a house or a bank account or a brokerage account out of your name, and it goes directly into the name or names of other individuals because they inherit or receive ownership of that account in their own name, and they get sued, a judgment entered against them, a lawsuit, or a divorce, because it's in their name, it can be taken from them. Whereas with a properly drafted trust, your beneficiaries will inherit from you in a way that cannot be taken from them by their creditors, judgments, lawsuits, or divorces. We can create these protective, multi-generational protective trusts that protect your wealth for future generations and keep it essentially outside of the reach of their creditors, their judgments, and their divorces. So life is short, and then you die. So plan while you can. You can only do this kind of planning while you're mentally and physically capable of doing it. Once you become incapacitated, it's too late. And that's living probate right there. Living probate when you're alive, but you don't have the documents, powers of attorney needed to appoint someone. Now your whole life goes to a judge, and the judge decides who's going to manage your financial affairs and your medical decisions. So don't let that happen to you. Please take my advice and think about it. Think about what that means to you and your family, what this kind of planning can do for them if you do it successfully, and how it will harm them if you don't. And then talk with a competent legal document preparer like Life Planning Inc. I've been doing this for 27 years, thousands and thousands of clients all over the country, worked with financial institutions, broker dealers, credit unions, financial advisors, insurance agents, CPAs, all form and manner of trusted intermediary who have these trusted relationships with consumers, with their clients. Many of them, all across the country, refer their clients to us because we're the good guys. They know that we'll take great care of them. We'll charge reasonable fees on a flat fee basis. We'll never take advantage of a client. We'll bend over backwards to make sure that everything is perfect. And we send the clients back to the referral source, the financial advisor, the financial institution, whomever, with a smile on their face. If you go to our Google page for Life Planning Inc., you'll see we have virtually all 5-star ratings. And so that's what we do. We serve others, and we do it, I'd like to think, with a high degree of integrity and competence and caring, which makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in the process. So we take prospective clients right where they are, not knowing what they don't know, gently walking them through all the information that they need to make fully informed decisions at every decision point. And then we create a beautiful set of documents that really accurately reflect their wishes. And we do our best not to leave any stone unturned. In other words, lots of safety nets, lots of what if provisions, that if this happens, then that, so that we know what will happen, that we don't run into a dead end and all of that. So that's Life Planning Inc. Just want you to know a little bit more about us and our legal document preparation business. Certified legal document preparer authorized by the Arizona Supreme Court to provide consumers with legal information, not advice, never advice, just legal information, enough legal information to make fully informed decisions at every decision point. But we're not lawyers. We don't give legal advice. The other distinction between what I do and what an attorney does is that although my conversations with clients are confidential, there's no attorney-client privilege. So Life Planning Inc. is a great resource, a trusted resource by many professionals and individuals and businesses alike to make the estate planning, business planning, and asset protection planning process that we all need. They say that there are 90 million households in the United States. 30 million households need help getting their legal affairs in order. We're a great choice. Anyway, give us a call. Let's go to the final slide, Toby, if you don't mind terribly. Thank you. Schedule a free consultation. That initial 30-minute, hour-long, 90-minute long consultation never costs you a dime. We'll spend time on the phone, by Zoom, or in my office in Scottsdale, and we'll talk about your circumstances, answer all your questions, present your options, and then you can do with that information whatever you please. Over 95% of clients who receive that information engage us to prepare their legal documents, but it's a free consultation. It doesn't cost you anything unless and until you choose to engage us to prepare those documents for you. So a local number in Arizona, 480-451-7727. Anywhere in the country, you can reach us toll free, 877-438-7878. You can go ahead directly to my calendar if you want and schedule 30 minutes, 60 minutes, even 90 if you think it's important or you need it. It can be as long or as short as you want the meeting, of course. But go to my calendar at calendly.com/Warner-1, and then send your questions or open up a line of communication with us by emailing me directly at warner@lifeplanninginc.com. Okay, looking forward to speaking with you soon. Thanks for taking the time to hear this out. And life is short. Then you die. So plan while you can. Okay, thanks. Talk soon.